This month is March, and the corresponding step and tradition of the month read as follow. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Third tradition, our membership ought to include all who suffer from alcoholism. Hence, we may refuse none who wish to recover, nor ought AA membership ever depend upon money or conformity. Any 2 or 3 alcoholics gathered together for sobriety may call themselves an AA group, provided as a group they have no other affiliation. Next, I would like to introduce our opening speaker, Scott, to share 10 minutes of their experience, strength, and hope surrounding the third step and/or third tradition.
All right. Scott, alcoholic. Hey, everybody. My sobriety date's 10/14/2022. And last time I stood at this podium was to speak at my dad's funeral a few years ago. This was his church, and I'm aware of and grateful for his presence here with us tonight. He was a good man, and I'm also grateful for the steps which have enabled me to have a relationship with him that I didn't think was possible, even in his death. So thanks be to God for that, and I thank him for the father who he was. So I'm going to speak for a few minutes on step 3, and I'm going to try to come out of a little bit out of my experience and a little bit out of the book. And I'm just going to get right into it with the book, starting actually on page 60. And one thing that was explained to me a while back is that the way the book is laid out is that the first section of the book describes the problem, alcoholism. And they spend over 60 pages describing that problem. And then an entire chapter on the solution and we agnostics. And it's here in how it works that we begin to pivot toward the program of action that helps us get from the problem to the solution. And that program of action involves precise, exact, specific, clear-cut directions. And the way in which those directions are laid out is that for almost every step from 3 to 12, it's going to tell us when to take the step, how to take the step. There's at least one prayer, and there's at least one promise. And I think step 3 is an excellent illustration of that. So when the authors tell us that the main purpose of this book is to tell other people how they recovered, I think they nailed it. And I think we have everything we need in this book to do just that. So on page 60, it begins being convinced. So convinced of what? Convinced of those 3 pertinent ideas, A, B, and C. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own life, step 1. Am I clear? Am I clear that I have a physical allergy? Am I clear that when I start drinking, I don't know if, when, or how I'm going to stop? That I've lost power, choice, and control over the 2nd drink and the 5th drink and the 10th drink and so on? Am I also clear that I have a mental obsession? And that not only have I lost power, choice, and control over the 2nd and the 5th and the 10th, but I've lost power, choice, and control over the 1st drink. So I'm powerless over alcohol when I'm drinking it, and I'm powerless over alcohol when I'm not drinking it. And it took me a long time to understand that second piece. Physical allergy was easy, slam dunk. I got that almost from the very first day I started drinking. But the mental obsession, much harder for me to understand. It took a really long time. And that C, God could and would if he were or B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. So am I clear that I'm suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer? And C, that God could and would if he were sought. So this was another thing. I was in and out of AA for over 30 years before I finally started to understand what this program was fundamentally about. For the longest time, I was coming to the rooms. I occasionally tried to work some steps, got a couple sponsors, because I thought the problem was alcohol. And so I worked the steps as if the problem were alcohol. And believe me, alcohol was definitely a problem. but it wasn't the problem. And we hear about that in these pages right here. So I was finally able to get a sponsor who understood that and who walked me through the steps as if, yes, the problem's alcohol, but the solution is a personal relationship with God. And part of what step 3, I think, offers us is an invitation to pursue that relationship. So the when of step 3 is when we're convinced. Am I convinced of steps 1 and 2? If I'm not, I need to go back and reread them and restudy them and have an experience with step 1. And then they go on to say, just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? So precise, specific, clear-cut directions. And they're going to spend a couple pages on explaining what self-will is in a very general way, so that we can become convinced that, yes, alcohol is a problem, but so is self-will. In fact, that may be the problem. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. What usually happens when we're living out of self-will? And I know these are among the pages of the Big Book that are most often read. One thing that was suggested to me by someone who's here in the room tonight is that I read some of these sentences in the first person so that I can have an experience with self-will. So it might sound something like, the show doesn't come off very well. Scott begins to think life doesn't treat him right. Scott decides to exert himself more. Scott becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, Scott is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? And then they continue, selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our trouble, so not alcohol. And then they describe what I think is this cycle of self-will. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. So Peter read that old preamble, and we have a way out on which we can absolutely agree. And I think part of that way out is a way out of that cycle described by Dr. Silkworth in The Doctor's Opinion, that cycle of the physical allergy, the mental obsession, the guilt, shame, and remorse, and it starts all over. I also think it gives us a way out of this cycle of self-will. And one of the ways it does that is through the next steps 4 through 9. And I think what comes next is a preview of step 4. We step on the toes of our fellows, column 1, and they retaliate, column 2. Column 2. Sometimes they hurt us, column 3, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past, we have made decisions based on self, column 4, which later place us in a position to be hurt. So, do I want out of that cycle? So how do we get out of the cycle? Above everything, we must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. So above everything, paramount importance. We must, or it kills us. Who makes that possible? God makes that possible. So I can't do it. So to me, that's also a preview of 6 and 7. Yes, God, I need your help with this alcohol problem. And yes, God, I also need your help with this selfishness problem. We had to have God's help. So how do we get it? This is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that here and after in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal, we are his agents. He is the father, and we are his children. And then we get some promises and a prayer. And the way I've come to understand that prayer is the prayer is ultimately an affirmation of the decision, right? That I'm no longer in the management business, that I am going to turn my life over to God, that I'm going to be God's co-pilot, and that God's going to run the show. And I think we do that in ways both large and in ways that are small. And I'm just going to read one quick thing from the transition between 3 and 4, because I think it's been important for me to understand, people often say the way to take step 3 is to move on to step 4. And I think that's true. I think there are other things too, but I do think these next couple sentences make it pretty clear why step 4 is so important and some of the subsequent steps. Next, we launch on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision, step 3, was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face steps 4 and 5 and be rid of steps 6 through 9, the things, selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, which had in ourselves, which had been blocking us off from what? Blocking us off from our relationship with God. Our liquor was but a symptom of what? A symptom of the spiritual malady, right? I'm restless, irritable, and discontent because if I'm constantly trying to run the show, that's ultimately where that's going to lead me, and that will lead me to a drink again and again and again without a solution. So I can either treat my alcoholism with alcohol or I can treat it with the steps. And I choose to treat it with the steps today. So one quick promise that's in those third step promises is this notion of being able to face life successfully. And that promise has come to mean a great deal to me, especially in the past couple of years. It doesn't say I'm always going to be successful in life, but it says I can face life no matter what my circumstances. I get to face life successfully because I know God's got me. God meets me where I'm at, and for that I'm truly grateful. So I thought it would be appropriate if you're willing to join me to close with the third step prayer after a brief moment of silence. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Michael B. from Akron, Ohio.
Hey everybody, I'm Michael, I'm alcoholic. I'd like to say I'm delighted to be here. I'm honored to be here. I mean that from my heart. Patrick, thank you. Joel, Mariah, Jacob, and Patrick, right, who did the third step, or is that you? Scott, sorry about that, but fantastic job. That was just wonderful. My sobriety date is February 1st, 2009. My home group is the Akron Primary Purpose Group. We meet twice a week. We meet on Thursday nights, and we're a big book study, and then we meet on Monday nights, and we study the 12 and 12. I have a sponsor, and I sponsor some guys. And when I was early sober, maybe I was a year sober, something like that, my sponsor said, don't separate yourself from whoever you're sponsoring or who you're talking to. And I remember I was just, what does that mean? You know what I mean? I just didn't understand what that meant. And I know that if I talk too much about what it was, maybe you're new, maybe somebody's in here new and you did like I did, and you say, oh, I never drank like that. And you find your way right away from me. And it's not my intention. Or you say, oh, I drank way worse than him. And same thing, you find yourself away from me. And the idea is to look for things that we have in common, that we have a unity, that our common welfare is to come first. And my sponsor would say any talk that leaves out a tradition is incomplete. And I do believe that. I believe in the we of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's been tried and true for me for 17 years, and I'm honored and grateful to be sober. I grew up in Akron. My mother was young when she had me. She was 16. By the time my mother was 21, she had 3 kids. My father enlisted in the Air Force, and he was one of us. So he was dishonorably discharged, and he started making his way in institutions and so forth and so on. So my mother had 3 kids, and she was a single mom. And for most of my life, anytime I got in trouble, anything that was going on, I blamed her for it. And if I got anything that went wrong, it was her fault. It's because of how I grew up, because of who my mother was, because my father wasn't around. I played that card till absolutely just wouldn't work anymore. And because of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm able to see that I'll tell you about me being a single dad, but I was a single dad of a little girl, just one kid, and sober. And it was tough. And I can't imagine having 3 kids and being 21 and making sure that we had holidays and food and we were taking care of them. I'm so grateful for my mother for that. I honor her for that. But we were poor. And so I looked around. I compared myself to the other kids in the neighborhood. And the longer that I'm sober, in the big book it says, right in the doctor's opinion, it says, our alcoholic life seems the only normal one, and after a time, we can't differentiate the true from the false. And so the longer that I'm sober, what I most relate to with that is this thing that the big book or our program would call a spiritual malady. That I had this emptiness inside of me. The big book would describe it and it would say, I'm restless, I'm irritable, I'm discontent, and it would further say that I'm full of fear and I can't make a living and I can't be a real help to other people. And use these different adjectives to describe that malady. Some people would say, I have a hole in my soul. And or some people would say, no matter where I go, I don't feel like I fit in. I feel out of place all the time. And if you're one of the home group members back home, when you're acting funny and your alcohol's and whooping on you, we say, you're acting weird. And so I had that going on way before I took a drink. I was restless, I was irritable, I was discontent, I was shy, I was awkward, I was strange, and honestly, I was probably weird. If I was in any social situation, I would go to the wall or to the corner, and I would, hope that you wouldn't talk to me because I would blush, and I just couldn't handle social interactions, scared to death of women. That was going on way before I took a drink. And the problem with that happening way before I took a drink is just like the big book describes. I've had it so long that I don't know what it's like to not have it. It becomes normal to me. I can't differentiate the truth from the false because I don't know what the truth is. This feeling inside of me, this emptiness that I have, that I walk around day in and day out and I go to bed with, and I think I got it and you must got it and you do better with it somehow. So there must be something even worse wrong with me because I can't figure out how to adapt and deal with life like you do. And so my first solution to that, or if you would call it a fix, maybe, was like athletics and school. I tried to get straight A's in school and try to hit home runs and shoot 3-pointers and all those things. And if you hit a home run, you run around the bases and everybody pats you on the head when you come back around home. Good job, Mike, and you're a part of, and you're like, everything is right there in that moment, and I got what I was looking for. The emptiness went away for just a little bit, but then I'd go sit on the bench and somebody else would be up to bat. And then I'd go looking for it again and looking for it again. And I was doing that way before I took a drink. The problem with trying to do that, especially with baseball, was if I struck out, I would try to fight the pitcher. Or I would go behind the bleachers and cry because it was more. It meant it was something deeper that I had going on, which I had no ability to articulate until I come to Alcoholics Anonymous. In our big book, it talks about it perfectly. When I was in middle school, my buddy Jason, he's my best friend in the neighborhood. His folks moved to West Virginia. And they moved down there because they got a job, and he came home for the holidays the next year, and he brought back with him a jar of moonshine. And it was in a jar. It was like a mason jar. I don't know where he got it or how he got it. We hid it under the bed, and we waited till New Year's Eve because that's what you do on New Year's Eve. You drink and you get drunk, and that's what we were going to do. And so my mom took us to her boyfriend's house, which was like a biker party, and my mom's boyfriend at the time had teenage kids. And then I was in middle school. It was me, my little brother, my buddy Jason, and I'm standing there just like I would any other social gathering, shy, awkward, strange, and weird, hoping no girls talk to me because I'm scared to death of them. Everybody's having a good time. It's New Year's Eve. Everybody's having fun, and I'm doing what I do because I don't have a solution. The adults leave, and the teenagers turn on the music, and everybody's dancing, and so we opened up the jar of moonshine, and we started drinking the moonshine, and I got drunk. And what I remember about that drunk was I was able to talk to the fellas about sports. I was able to flirt with the girls. I was able to dance. I was able to hoot and holler and do everything that I was normally not ever able to do. And so quickly, even on my very first drunk, I can only articulate this looking back, is alcohol did something for me that nothing else ever did. It let me be there with those people. I wasn't better than nobody, and I wasn't less than anybody. And so I loved it. It did something for me no home run, no three-pointer, no straight A ever did before. And so quite naturally, I loved it. The other thing I remember about that first drunk was the next day I woke up on the couch and I was sleeping with a teenage blonde. And I knew for sure that I didn't have enough courage to do that on my own. And I remember laying there and she was still asleep and I had my arm around her and, I'm not drunk no more, so now I'm scared again and I'm shy. And I'm laying there and it's like, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I want to do it again. I want to do it again. I loved it. I want to do it again. And so that's exactly what I did. I set out I loved it. It was a new thing for me. Drinking was awesome and we didn't have any connections. So we stole. We'd steal it from the gas stations or the grocery stores, whatever we get our hands on. And we'd go behind the garage or in the basement or whatever we can do. And as my drinking progressed, because it did certainly progress, all of my inhibitions lowered. I didn't no longer care about sports. I didn't care too much about the schoolwork. I was looking for a fix in those things, and I found it in alcohol. And so the first people to notice that I was having a problem was my coaches, because I was really competitive. And my coaches would come knocking and say, how's come you missed practice? And I'd make up some lie, and then they'd keep on coming, and I told them, I can't see anymore. And they was like, oh, okay. And then like a couple of days later, my coach came and he took me to the damn eye doctor. And I was like, oh, I was in the gym and I couldn't get out of it. But I took me to the eye doctor. Turns out I needed glasses, but I still didn't go to practice. Dropped out of high school in 10th grade. I drank all the way up. All I wanted to do was party. I came from a pretty rough neighborhood. When I was a kid, the thing to do was to be tough. And we listened to Tupac and we listened to Biggie and we wanted to be tough as much as we could. The problem with that was, for me, was I just wasn't that tough. And the only way I could fit in or hang out with the fellas in the neighborhood was I'd drink. If I drank, I could fight. If I drank, I could steal. I could do all the things the fellas in the neighborhood were doing and be a part of it, but without alcohol, I was incapable of doing it. And to some degree, that's nothing wrong with that, because stealing and fighting maybe I had a little decent morals, you know what I mean? But I couldn't fit in with them. Start in and out of the detention home, lying about what's going on. Every once in a while, I'll tell the truth if it got me out of jail or out of going to some kid's home or something like that. And maybe right when I was almost 18 years old, my mom had had enough, and I got busted for a curfew, and we all got taken downtown, and all the folks would come and get them one by one. It was a big room full of kids that got picked up on the sweep, and I was the last kid there, and they told me that my mom, she wasn't coming to get me. She had enough. And so they took me to the detention home, and I'm in the detention home, and, I'm wiggling and squirming and promising I'll never do it again, and the same things I always do. And I have a girlfriend, and she's the most important thing in the world other than alcohol to me. And I'm trying to get a phone call to her to have her to come visit. And I called the wrong number. I had one phone call before lights out, and I called the wrong number. And the lady answered the phone, and I said, oh, ma'am, would you please call Tracy and tell her she has a visit at this time? I said, please do this for her. And I, conned her into it, and she said, okay. The next Saturday came, and Tracy came to visit me, and we're arguing and fighting and so forth. And she said, you know that lady you called to have you come and have me come visit? And I said, yeah. She said, she called me back and said, Jesus told her that she's supposed to love you and take care of you, and here's her phone number, and she wants you to call her back. And I was like, what in the world is going on? My mom don't want nothing to do with me. I mean, what the heck? I'll give her a call, right? I give her a call, and I say, hey, it's Mike, and she says, oh, son, I love you. God told me to. And I was like, what in the world's going on? You know what I mean? And I don't quite understand what's going on. And so I called her frequently every week or so, and she just kept telling me the same thing. And I had nowhere to go when I got out of that jail time. And she found out about it, and she said, well, you can come and live with me. God gave me this house, and I should share it with you. And I thought, what, does this lady want to have sex with me? What is going on here? What? I don't understand this. And so I don't have nowhere to go, so I go, and her name was Rosella, but I called her Miss Rosie. And I couldn't stop drinking and carrying on, and I would drink and get in trouble and act a fool and disrespect Miss Rosie. Miss Rosie had children of her own. They didn't like me because I was disrespectful and I was a drunk, and I couldn't be trusted. I'd steal from her and lie to her, and I'd steal and I'd go on a binge, and I'd come home and she'd say, "The devil's bad, ain't he?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And she just loved me, and she loved me. I got nothing to compare to the love that she loved me with, except for the love that I found in Alcoholics Anonymous with God. And that went on for a few years, in and out of jails, in and out of rehabs and detoxes. I'm trying to do things to stay sober. I'm, going to the psych, and they'd give me meds, and I'd get the meds, and I'd drink, and then I'd cry. And I'd say, "Oh, man, these meds, they got me wrong." And you know what I mean? I got to quit taking the meds. And going to detoxes and commitments in 90 days, and you get on the druggy buggy and you go to the meetings and come to AA and say what you say. "My name's Mike and I'm an alcoholic." But I don't know what it means, and I just say it because you say it. "My name's Mike and I'm powerless." And I just say it because you say it. I don't know what it means. And to tell you the truth, what I thought it meant, what I thought when I said that was that I can't get a job, I can't stay out of jail, I can't take care of my kids, my driver's license is suspended again, I'm back on probation. My outside circumstances are what makes me an alcoholic. And when I come to your meetings and I pray the prayers you pray and I hang out with you and your little bit of spirit rubs off on me, then what happens is them outside circumstances, they start to get a little bit better. And as my outside circumstances get better, and that's the whole reason I'm powerless, then I lose my powerlessness. So I could never write a 4-step. I could do a 1. I didn't really know. Big Book says I have to fully concede to my innermost self that I'm an alcoholic, and this is the first step in recovery. It's pretty tough to fully concede to your innermost self that you're an alcoholic if you don't know what it is. And Scott talked about it today: physical allergy, a mental obsession, a spiritual malady. It's vital that I know these. Big Book would say I needed to take my first step. I got to understand that. One of the times I was in jail, Miss Rosie's still loving on me, doing the things she does, and I got a call from the chaplain one day, and they told me Miss Rosie passed away. And me and Miss Rosie had gotten close. I certainly took advantage of her and her love that she had for me, but although it was strange to me, I never forgot it, and it spoke to my heart because I really believe, if I look back today, I really believe that Miss Rosie showed me the love of God that I'd never seen before. And that she told me that from the very first phone call, and she believed it, and she demonstrated that in my life, and I'm forever grateful for that. In and out of jails, I start trying to do different things to get and stay sober. I go to the church. Sometimes I go to church, or I'd be in jail, and they'd say, "God's got a plan for you." And Miss Rosie told me the same thing. And I'd say, "I ain't got a plan for me." And what's it all about? And they'd tell me that he wants me to have a better life. And so I would buy into that deal, and I would, you know how they do, they'd say, "Come on down." You know what I mean? And I'd come on down, and I'd be kneeling and crying because I was busted and disgusted, and I didn't have no hope. And I would pray the prayer, and I'd get excited, and I think it's all going to be all right now. And I leave out of there, and a day later, I'm drunk. And I didn't understand what was going on. And this has been going on for years. So I tried different denominations. I memorized how far it was from Jerusalem to Jericho. I thought all these things were going to come together, and knowledge is power, right? And so I'm doing all these things, and I bet you I got saved 200 times trying to get sober. One time I came down, and they said, "You got to speak in tongues." And I was like, "Okay." Now, I just want to tell you that I don't think there's nothing wrong with any of those things. It just wasn't the solution to my alcoholism. And I'm down at the damn altar, and they're like, "You got to speak in tongues." And they got their hands on me, and they're speaking in tongues. Don't really sound like much of nothing to me. And they're like, "You got to do it." And I was like, "I don't know how." And they said, "Just get the mumbling stuff." Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, "Oh, my God, what is going on?" I knew I was lying, and I wasn't getting in. Another thing I did was I got baptized probably 7 or 8 times. I mean it. I'd get dunked and I'd come out of the water and I would be pumped up. I'd be like, yeah. And I'd be like, this is it. I'm going to be good. I'm going to stay sober. And then a week would go by. Sometimes I'd sleep with my Bible. I mean, anything to not drink again. I don't want to drink no more. A week later, or 2 weeks maybe, I'd make it drunk. One time I got baptized Sunday morning and I was at the bar and I was still wet. And I remember feeling it, like, 'cause you wet pants and you're like, get a little rash, and I'm at the bar, I'm like, what is going on? And so I tried all those things, and I really believe the folks who told me that God loved me and had a plan for me. And Miss Rosie, I mean, what's going on with that? There's got to be a God, right? But he probably don't want much to do with me. And so the way that I interpreted the plan that God had for me was, based on my experience, was that God's plan for me was so rehabs will stay open. God's plan for me must be so correction officers keep a job. And I don't like the plan. It's a crappy plan. I don't want nothing to do with the plan. I feel second rate. I feel devalued in that, and I got resentful at God. Another thing I tried to do, I seen on TV, hey, Bob, how come you don't hang out with us no more? And Bob would say something along the line, I don't know what show it was. I got a family now. I got a wife and kids, and I got to take care of my family. And how I interpret that is that men, when we have families, we can tap into a power, a willpower, we're normally not able to tap into, and do things we're normally not able to do. And so if I knock my girlfriend up and have a kid, I'm going to stay sober. And so I knocked her up, and I love her as best I know how. And when she went to labor, I was drinking, and I came to the hospital, and I've been drinking, and my son was born, and it was a very powerful experience. It was very spiritual. And I remember that when he was born and I held this little baby, which was my son, the desire to drink had left me for a time. And I really believe today that had way more to do with him than it had to do with me. We took my son home. About 5 days later, 6 days later, a week later, everything's going good, and I tell his mother, I'll be home in a couple hours. And she said, in with what the big book would call frothy emotional appeal, please don't do it. You've been doing so good. Our baby, he's only 5 days old or whatever. Don't. And I'm like, what's the big deal? I'll be home in a couple hours. I really believed it. I have no idea about phenomena craving or this allergy to alcohol. I have no idea about it. And this delusion is in my mind. So I go with the intention of going for a couple hours. And if you're like me, the couple hours would be a couple days, a couple weeks, a couple months. And if I got in good trouble, it might be a couple years. So my son was neglected as a result of my alcoholism. Same thing, in and out of institutions, going to the rehabs. I come to AA, I just never heard, I didn't hear the message what the big book talks about. I just didn't hear it. I didn't get it. I didn't understand. A few years go by, another bright idea, seen it on a bib. The bib said, Daddy's little girl. And so I said, well, maybe if I have a little girl, all this will work out. So I got a new girlfriend by this time. So I knocked her up. A couple months go by. She gets an ultrasound. She's having a little girl. The plan is coming together. When she goes into labor, I'm at the bar, and they call me, and I say, she's not really in labor. She just wants me to come home. I was like, why she got to do it today? I bought some things from the bar and snuck them in the hospital and hid them in the bathroom of the maternity ward. And I sat with my girlfriend at the time and acted like I cared because I didn't care. My experiences would be that alcoholism, in my experience, is more powerful than parents' love for their child. And that was my experience. And I acted like I cared, and I didn't want to be there. And then my daughter was born, and it was a powerful experience. It was a miracle. And I held my little girl in my arms, and the desire to drink left me for a couple days. Brought her home. A week later, told her mother, I'll be home in a couple hours. Same thing. Please don't go. What's the big deal? A couple hours, a couple days, a couple weeks, a couple months. My children were neglected because alcohol was my master. And so by the time my alcoholism was towards the end of before I got sober, I believed in my heart that any man in the world would be a better father to my children than me. And I believed it. You would have put me on a lie detector test, I would have passed. I ended up going to jail for the millionth time for whatever, stealing or something along them lines. The big book says that we have two alternatives. I can blot out of my consciousness my intolerable situation as best as I can, or I can accept spiritual help. That's all it says. There's two. And the big book will go on to say there's no middle of the road solution. And so I don't know that the big book says this, but I'm in jail for the billionth time again. I done got baptized and saved and been to rehab and on the meds, had kids, moved to Detroit, moved to North Carolina, did everything in the world to try to get and stay sober, and nothing worked. And so in my mind, I blotted out of my consciousness, my heart, as best I could, my intolerable situation, and I just didn't try no more. I didn't believe there was no hope for me whatsoever. I figured I was just going to be a crumb bum, and I was never going to have a family or do anything worthwhile in life. And so when I was in jail, I didn't do anything worth a while. I lied, I stole, I got drunk, I got high, and I gambled. And when it was time to go, because I've been there before, they asked me if I had a ride home, and I lied, and I said, yeah. And the reason I said yeah, because I knew they was going to take my little bit of state money and make me buy a bus ticket home. I didn't buy my bus ticket there, and I couldn't understand why I had to buy one home. So I hitchhiked back to Akron, and I didn't have a family member or a friend or every bridge had been burnt to smithereens. And so there's no hope for me. Why try? I get arrested on the same day. I don't even have on a pair of clothes of my own. I still have on the clothing that they give me. I don't care. It's just how it's going to be for me. I ended up moving into the dope house in West Akron. Hold on. I didn't move into it. I just didn't leave. I went there because I was homeless and I had nowhere to go, and that was the only place I was allowed to be, and the only time I left was when I didn't want to share. And when I didn't want to share, I'd go to some motel or wherever I could get myself to, and I'd drink myself to oblivion, and then I'd wash out, and then I'd have nowhere to go, and then I'd go back to that house and do whatever I had to do to get in there and act and be a chameleon and play the role of whatever they needed me to play because I didn't have nowhere to go. And so one night I was out on a binge, and maybe it was a couple day binge, and I came back to the house. The house had boards on the windows, and the doors were screwed shut, and the police had raided the house, and all I could think of was, I'm glad I wasn't there. End up breaking in the back door of the house and living in this basement of this abandoned house that's boarded up. And by this time in my life, I'm about 29, 30 years old. I'm drinking to live, and I'm living to drink. I don't have a job. I don't have a friend. I become an unwelcome hanger-oner, a lone wolf, like the big book would say. I don't even care about interacting with other people unless I can get something from you so I can get more drink. And so whenever I wake up and I go down to the gas station, I'd either panhandle enough change or I'd go in there and steal me one. And once I started drinking, I had no control of the amount I took. And that happened over and over and over again. And one night I woke up, it was nighttime, and I went down to the gas station and got me one, and I didn't have any more means for any more, and I didn't know what to do, and I had to get another one before 2:30 because you can't buy any more alcohol after 2:30 where I come from. And so I did what I do when I find myself in them situations is I steal. And so I broke into a van, and I found it was like, I don't know, a guy like me's dream. I found big bags of change, big bags of quarters and nickels and dimes, and I thought, this is awesome. The cops drove by, and they shined their light in the window, but they kept driving, and so I said, they must be looking for someone else. And so I kept looking through the van, and I peeked my head over the window, and there was cops everywhere. And I tried to run with the quarters, but they were too heavy, so it was like my first experience with letting go, I tell you. I'm running from the police, and I'm jumping fences, and I'm breaking the pickets off, and dogs are chasing me, and I'm kicking over flower pots, flashlights are flashing around, and in my mind, I gotta hurry up and get away before 2:30 because I gotta get another drink. And I'm running, I can't get away. I'm running 2:30 to the long pass, and I'm still running, they're finding me everywhere I hide. And so I hide behind this house, and my plan is I'm gonna hide behind this house, catch my breath, and from here to the back of the room, there's some bushes. I'm gonna barrel through these bushes, and hopefully I'm gonna get away. So I catch my breath, and with everything I got left in me, I go with it, all I got, and I barrel through the bushes. The problem was the bushes wasn't bushes. The bushes was the top of a tree. And so I run off a cliff. And I fall down through this tree, and I land on some railroad tracks. I checked my arms and legs for broken bones, and I looked up, and I said, oh, I don't think they're coming down here after me. I didn't know where I was, so I turned right. And I ended up way in East Akron, and the place I call home, which is the abandoned basement, is in West Akron. And there's only one way. It's Market Street. East Market Street, through downtown, up West Market Hill, back to the abandoned basement. And I'm walking. I weigh about 190 pounds a day. Maybe I weigh 110, 115 then. I get about almost to downtown, which would be about halfway, and I'm walking with all I got because I'm exhausted. And I got pricker bush things in me and briars and stuff in my clothes. And I see my wrist, and it's skin and bone and dirt. And it reminded me of how disappointed I was in my own self. It reminded me of how much I hated me. And I prayed a prayer I didn't mean to pray. The prayer it wasn't eloquent. It wasn't like I thought, hey, maybe you ought to say a prayer. Maybe call on God. Maybe call somebody for help. I didn't think that at all. It just came from me, and it was this. God, I'm hungry. I don't know why. I just looked up this guy and said that, and I started walking, and about from here to the middle of the room, there's a slice of pizza on the sidewalk. I'm too selfish to think to say thank you. Or like, can I pray for a house or a car or something cool? I didn't think that at all. All I could think of was, how am I going to get this pizza off the sidewalk without anybody seeing me? And so I waited for a gap in traffic, and I picked up the pizza, and I examined it for bugs or bites. And there was no bugs or bites, and it was a perfect piece of pizza, like it was from a commercial. I mean, it had sausage and everything. I just looked at the pizza like, wow. I ate the pizza, and I remember thinking, like, maybe somebody see me get this pizza off the sidewalk, so I held it in the air. I held this pizza in the air, and I'm walking down Market Street taking bites off it, and in my mind, I think they're going to never think I got off the sidewalk if I hold it up here. I get back to the abandoned basement after a long walk, and the door's hanging on 2 hinges, and someone broke in the abandoned basement and stole my abandoned stuff. And I thought, who would do something like that, man? What kind of bums? What is going on? So I did a check for people, and there's no one there. I shimmied up the door, and I was getting ready to go to sleep. I just wanted to go to sleep. And right before I went to sleep, it was like my life passed through my mind as fast as I could think it. And it wasn't all the good times and my children being born. It wasn't of, the successes I had in my life. When I say my life passed through my mind, what I mean is all the times I tried before and failed started coming up as fast as I could think it. Every time I'd say, I'm never going to do it again, I'd look myself in the mirror and promise myself I'm never going to do it again, and getting baptized and getting saved and doing this and on the druggy buggies and all them times I said, I'm never going to. And what would happen was when I would say that, I would mean it with everything I got, but I would drink again and I didn't understand what was going on. And alcoholism would pipe up and it'd say this, you didn't mean it good enough. You got to mean it more, Mike. And so I tried to mean it more, and I'd clench my fist tighter, and I tried with all I got to stay sober, and I'd drink again, and then alcoholism would say, see, you didn't mean it enough. You got to keep trying harder. And all these things are coming to my mind as fast as I could think it. And it was like, for the first time in my life, I realized that every time I said I'm never going to do it again, I meant it, and I couldn't do it. And it scared me. And it also scared me that with every intention and good thing I had inside of me to be a good father, to keep a job, to do things worthwhile in life, every time I meant to do good, I drank. And it didn't scare me that it was going to get worse because I've been under the delusion that somehow, someday I'm going to beat the game. Someday I'm going to come out of this and it's all going to work out great. And I'm doing this and I'm living in this abandoned basement and I believe this lie that alcoholism is telling me. And it went away. And it scared me half to death. And what scared me was I knew for sure it was never getting better. And I fell on my knees and I prayed the prayer we know. It was, God, please help me. Nothing happened. I went to sleep. I woke up. It was still daytime. I started walking down to the gas station like I always do. I'm walking down a pretty busy road. And across the road, there's a little girl riding a bike and had training wheels on it. And I looked across the street, and she was happy riding that little bike, and I took a couple steps, And then I did a double take. And the reason I did a double take because I knew something, maybe it was an intuition. But I knew in my heart that no matter what that little girl did, nothing could get God to stop loving her. And I started crying. And I was like, what is going on? I took a couple steps. I'm like trying to figure out what's going on, what's wrong with me. And then I had another intuition, and that would be, Michael, God loves you the same way. And I started to cry, and I wept. And when I got to the gas station, I bummed 50 cents, and I called someone and begged them for a ride. And I had to talk them in to beg them to come and get me. And when they finally come to give me a ride, I remember I went to get in the front seat, and they locked the door, and they said, get in the back. And I remember how I felt. And the big book would talk about pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization and the many shapes that takes on for us. But I remember how I felt when they made me sit in the back seat. I had nowhere to go. And so I had them take me to an AA meeting. I didn't think AA worked. I've been to AA before. I told you about the druggy buggies and the rehabs, and I just didn't have nowhere to go. And so they dropped me off at the AA meeting, and no different than like you've seen out here. People were outside smoking cigarettes, and they were laughing, and they were having what we would call a fellowship. I didn't know what fellowship was. I didn't understand that. And so in the back of the parking lot, they hurried up and left. And I'm seeing the fellowship go on, and my alcoholism set in and said this: don't go into that meeting. Are you stupid? You just ate pizza off the sidewalk. You live in the basement, blah, 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 all these things. They just won't shut up. And I'm like, oh, man. And I almost believe it again. The only reason I went into that meeting was because of the experience I had earlier that day, when no matter what I tried to do, even with great intention and motives, I drank. So I simply went into the meeting because I didn't want to. And what I remember about that meeting was, I remember two things. Nobody did what I thought they were going to do. They shook my hand. They introduced themselves to me. They were kind to me. They sat next to me. And so what I remember essentially was I received a welcome I didn't deserve. And it was touching to me. And the other thing I remember is they had cake, because I was hungry. After the meeting was over, I bummed some cigarettes from some people. And I asked somebody I've been in, I call and get a ride. You can get a ride to a meeting. So I knew that already. And so I bummed some cigarettes and I had someone take me back to the abandoned basement. My first 3 days of sobriety, I spent in the abandoned basement reading my big book and reading my Bible. And I prayed a prayer that seemed to work. And that prayer was, God, please help me. And I had a meeting scheduled. I got that meeting and I walked to whatever brown bag or daytime meeting I could get to. And I noticed after 3 days of being sober, 3 days of doing this, I haven't thought really much about drinking that much. And I knew something was going on. I didn't know what was going on. And so I dared to dream a dream. And the dream I dreamed was this: God, if I could just be sober and homeless, that'd be so cool. That's all I could think of. I went up to our detox center, and that's where you go to get the drug and alcohol assessment, and I'm not drinking no more, and it's cold outside, and so I don't know what to do except for go back to rehab. And so I went up there, and they asked me all the questions, and I told them the truth. And they said, okay, we'll put you on the waiting list, and where you living? I told them where I was living, and so the very next day, they put me in a sober house. I walked up to the King School Group, which is just up the street from the abandoned basement, and I went up to the King School Group to get a sponsor. I didn't get a sponsor like we would tell guys, get a sponsor, work the 12 steps. A sponsor's going to help you work the 12 steps. He's going to guide you through experience, strength, and hope. I didn't believe in any of that. I didn't believe in the 12 steps. I had no idea what was going on, but I needed somebody else to tell me what to do because everything I did didn't work. And so I asked a man to be my sponsor. And I got to say this. Back in the day, when I'd be in the rehab centers, I'd go to the meetings, and some of the people at the meeting would say that, I was telling somebody this earlier, stay away from him. He's a big book thumper. You're like, oh, shit, I don't want nothing to do with that. What? Whoa. And so, no wonder I didn't know what alcoholism was. No wonder I couldn't, fully concede to my innermost self, because they didn't know to teach me. And so I looked up, and when I asked this man to sponsor, I got me a big book thumper, but it was on accident. And he said this to me on that same day. He said, when you wake up in the morning, before your feet hit the floor, ask God to keep you sober. And he paused, and he said, don't ask him to help you stay sober, because nothing you do works. And I was like, he knows something. He said, when you go to bed at night, get down on your knees and thank God he kept you sober for the day. And he started me working the steps. He read the doctor's opinion to me, and he described to me alcoholism. He described to me physical allergy, that once I start to drink, I cannot control the amount I take, and I can go into that long for the whole rest of the time, and why that happens. But he explained it to me in a way I understood. And then with my sober mind, and when I get out of the rehabs or I get out of the jails or I stayed sober for a couple of weeks off of baptism or whatever, my mind will obsess with the drink again. And the reason my mind obsesses with the drink again is because I'm empty on the inside. This pain and this emptiness is craving it's so terrible that my mind will obsess with the drink because it's the only thing that makes it go away. And it made sense to me. And for what my experience was with that was I had hope in that. I got a more hope in my first step experience than I ever had before because I've been confused for my whole life why I was doing the things I was doing. I had no idea why. And so I was like, oh, I've been doing this and stealing and going and do because I'm an alcoholic. This is what alcoholics do. They have to have another one. And it made perfect sense to me. And so I got a great amount of hope. With every action, the big book would say the main purpose of the book is to help you find the power greater in yourself, which will solve your problem. With every chair I put away, with every pot of coffee I made, with every step I took, with every prayer I prayed, what I started to see was God in everything and everywhere. I started to awaken spiritually is what was happening. And what I mean by that is I would get on the bus to go to a meeting. The old lady would be sitting on the front of the bus, and she'd smile at me. And I'd say, oh, my God, there's God. And I would start to cry. Oh, my God, I can't take it. I get off the same exact bus. The wind would be blowing a certain way. Oh, my God, there's God again. And I would just cry all the time. And the reason I cried was because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to handle the love I started to feel, the presence of God. My only reaction to that love was tears. Started working steps, seeing God in everything and everywhere. I don't have nothing. I live in a sober house, and I have absolutely nothing, but I'm more happier now than I've ever been in the entirety of my life. Started visiting with my children again. The love I have for my children was still there. It reappeared in my sobriety. I wanted to be with my kids, and so I started visiting with my children, and we're getting on the bus, and we're doing these things, and I have minimal resources, and that's what I did. But it was working out. One of you guys gave me a job and started teaching me a trade, and one day I was going through a workshop, and I know my sponsor wanted me to do a workshop. He took me through the steps, and he took me through quick, and I got some power, but he wanted me to go through a workshop, and we're going through this workshop, and so I'm doing this 4-step again, and I'm at the Mayflower, which is just in our neighborhood. It's not the greatest place in Akron, I promise you that, but maybe in the book it is. I'm in the Mayflower at the chapel, and I'm reading my 5th step to my sponsor, but the night before I got a phone call, and the phone call was that, Mike, Maya, my daughter's name is Amaya. Maya had been left somewhere. Her mother was still drinking and carrying on like we do, and she left her somewhere she wasn't supposed to be left, and she got hurt. Somebody hurt her. Life on life's terms. I don't know what to do. God makes me cry if you smile at me, right? My best I can come up with is I got to get like a hammer or a baseball bat. And it just don't weigh out, and I don't know what to do, but I know enough to do is what you taught me to do. I start to pray. I prayed. And I went to where my little girl was, and the next day I was at work, and my boss, which was one of you guys, I was mad at God because I couldn't understand why God could make me cry and rescue me from the yawning jaws of death. But my little girl would get hurt, and I didn't understand. And he said, you ever think about calling Children's Services? And I said, we don't call Children's Services where I come from. And he didn't say, well, that's stupid. He just repeated his question. I said, no, I never thought of that. Called Children's Services. Turns out I was the 40th phone call in regards to the well-being of my little girl. When she went to school the next day, they interviewed her at school. When she got off the bus that day, they took her into custody and took her mom to jail. I went to go be with her. She was 5. I went to go get my little girl, but they don't give little girls to guys like me. And I remember that night I cried and cried and cried. And I cried for 2 things, because I knew what it was like to be taken, to be away from my mother, and I know what that felt like. And the other reason I cried was because I knew my daughter was finally safe. So I'm reading my 5th step with my sponsor, and I say, hey, man, this happened, and I got to go to this hearing for my little girl. And he's like, go put on some nice clothes. And he, gave me the 1, 2, 3, and, and he took me up to be with this hearing, and all these people are saying they should have my little girl. Strangers to me. We should have Amaya. We should have Amaya. And this is where I noticed the for sure promises come true. And what I mean by that is these people were saying, we should have Amaya, and we should have Amaya. And I did the unthinkable, and I let them finish what they were saying. And I never did that before. And I say this, like normal things. I disagree. And I'd say, what in the world, where in the heck did that come from? And then they went on, and this went on for a while, and they said, Michael, why do you think you should have a Maya? You got this on your record, and you got a history of this. And I said, please don't hold me hostage to my past. It's not who I am. I'm sober today. I'm a member of Alcoholics, blah, 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 blah. And I remember as soon as I said it, I was like, where in the world did those words come from? And I was like, I know where they came from. I'm intuitively handling a situation that used to baffle me, right? I was like, yes. Start, open a case plan, a couple months go by. I would visit with my little girl. I'd get her for the weekend, and then we'd have to take her to her foster mom or foster dad, and it tore me up, and I could not never cry. And I tried not to cry, but I just couldn't. And so we'd drop her off, and I'd be broken up, and I'd go to the meeting. I'd do what you taught me to do. I'd go in the meeting and shake your hand and find out how you're doing, so I ain't got to think about me. And that would get me through the week, and that went on for a couple of months. And then I went to court, and the prosecutor and the guardian ad litem said, Your Honor, we recommend that Michael be given full custody of Amaya. And so when I was 7, 8 months sober, I got full custody of my little girl, and it's a miracle. Yeah. The problem with me having a little girl is I don't know what to do with her. I didn't really have a dad. I don't know what to do. I think that if I let her do whatever she wants to do, we're going to have this wonderful relationship, and I'm wrong. And I bring my old ideas to my newest experiences. And that's exactly what I did. And I love her, and I want her to be, and she's just running all over me. And we'll go to the store, and I need this and this, Dad, hair stuff, Brett's or whatever they are. And I remember she had to go to meetings with me. And I took her to my home group, and the lady at the home group said, why she got that in her hair? And I said, I don't know, because that's what she said she needed. And the lady said, if you don't start disciplining her, she's not going to love or respect you. And I said, what a crusty old lady. Why, As she spoke to my heart, and I remember thinking about that, I called my sponsor, and I said, I'm going to do this discipline thing. I don't know. And what's that got to do with AA? It got a lot to do with AA because my family was being reunited. And that's one of the reasons the AA took off so much. And it wasn't like I was even trying. I was simply doing AA, working my steps, doing the things my sponsor had me to do. And I just kept doing that. And what happened is all these things that I worry about all the time, the job and the money and my daughter and the car and the driver's license and all these other things that I can so easily put in front of my sobriety, they just stayed to the side. And as I kept my sobriety first, those things kept working out. And I've had to learn that over and over and over in my Alcoholics Anonymous. And somebody asked me today, hey, how long you been sober? And I told her, she said, well, it was like about 10 years. And I said, I had another bottom. Because I'd started getting away from that a little bit. I started putting the relationship and the money and my career. Now I got stuff. I got stuff now. I didn't have nothing when I got sober. Nothing. I didn't have a change of clothes. Now I got a motorcycle and boat and bills and credit, loans and houses and all these different things, and them things slowly slide into my priority, and I slowly fade away, and I don't even see that it's happening. And I act like in those things that I got the power back, and that happens. And if you'd asked me a week or two before the bottom fell out, I would have said, life is wonderful. And then it's in succession, boom, boom, relationship ends, friendship ends, money problems, all these things just fall out, and I don't know what's going on. So I took my little girl home, and she got out of school, and I said, after you do your homework, you're going to wash the dishes, because I don't know how else to discipline her. It's the best I got. She came and reached the sink, so she has to pull the stool. And I remember I'm sitting watching her, and she's got a tank top on and a ponytail, and she's listening to Hannah Montana, and she's washing the dishes. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? And so I went and sat on the couch. She washed the dishes, and I seen the light flicker off, and she came and sat next to me on the couch, and she rested her little head on my shoulder. And I knew the lady loved me enough to tell me the truth. And she loved my life and my family enough to tell me the truth, and that's been my experience over and over and over again in Alcoholics Anonymous. There are people who will tell me whatever I want to hear, and I can go answer shopping and get whatever answer I want. And I know there are. It's happened, and I can do it on purpose and look for it on purpose, but then there's them other people The people who love me enough love my life, and they love my sobriety more than they care about my feelings, and they will tell me the truth. And so after going through some things in life, what I come to find out is the people who told me what I wanted to hear, and they just let me do whatever and told me whatever, I don't really too much respect them too much. The people who were mean to me, I thought they were mean, and they told me the truth, I respect them people. The truest form of love I might know today is those people. And so I tried to keep them kind of people in my life. Raised my little girl, I joined the PTA. I was the only man PTA member. I just joined PTA because I didn't ever know what it was. I'm cutting out hearts and doing Valentines and Easter baskets and all these different things, and I love it. And I'm happy just to be alive. I signed up. My daughter asked me to coach softball. I signed up. I never thought they'd let me. They called me. They let me coach softball. I was blown away by that. I don't know how to coach little girl softball. I know baseball. I don't know what to do. And so I'm competitive, and so I would try my best to practice the principles in all my affairs. And what that looked like was this. Before the games and practice, I'd walk and I'd say, God, I'm powerless over these little girls, and their parents are unmanageable, and I need all the help I can get. Please help me. Please. And I coached them little girls with the principles I learned here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I taught them the we. I taught them commitment and showing up and integrity. And we were very successful. I coached all the way to high school. The high school asked me to coach. And I said, yeah. But they wouldn't let me because of my record. But I was honored to be asked. When I was about 2 years sober, I got sober during the recession. It was pretty rough, and I have, a bad record. I don't have any skills or trades. And so I ended up on accident starting a small business. Really what I was trying to do was I was trying to take care of my little girl and make ends meet. And I would do whatever I had to do that. If it meant digging a hole, I'd have dug a hole. And so I'd do these little odd and end things. And I just did it to keep the rent paid and to pay the bills and make sure my daughter was safe and taken care of. And as a result of doing that, it was literally me being in the passenger seat of God's vehicle. Today I own a small business and I employ several other guys and a lot of guys that are just like me. They have no skills whatsoever. And we've been, to some degree, very successful. Material things have come, motorcycles and boats and four-wheelers and tools and vacations and all kinds of different stuff. And there's been a couple times in my life where I've had the material things and I started to worship the material things more than I worship where the material things come from. And the man, he said it best. He said, today I own some things. The difference is I own the things and the things don't own me. And I learned that here in Alcoholics Anonymous. My daughter graduated in 2020. She walked down the aisle by herself, and I remember thinking I was at the back because it was the COVID or whatever. My daughter had never seen me drink, and I was proud as I possibly could be. Yeah. I'm active in Alcoholics Anonymous. Every Friday I go to the jail meeting. I go to Summit County Jail, and I take a meeting into the jail. We go to treatment centers. My home group was very active, and we're very busy. And I don't know in my community of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's Akron and it's whatever, I don't know another man or woman who's 17 years sober. And I remember when I first got sober, getting chips with people, and somebody get a year, and somebody get 6 months, and somebody have 3 months, and we'd be all excited about it. And now here I am at 17 years, and not one of them are still there. And I want to keep doing this thing. When I had my little girl, I'm a good alcoholic, and I bring my old ideas to my new experiences, and so I don't know what to do with little girls, so I want to be in a relationship like any other new guy. And so my alcoholism said this, Mike, you got to find her a mom. And so I thought it made sense to me, so I got myself into these terrible relationships. And what would happen would be, it'd be hot and heavy, about 9 months, about a year, it'd catch on fire, and then it would just explode. For the next 2 years, it would just be terrible. And it happened to me twice, and I was like, and what I seen after the second time was that my little girl was being hurt by it. And I did that twice, and I was brokenhearted in sobriety, emotional pain we don't deal so well with, and it was tough. I was brokenhearted. I was praying. I was trying to do the right thing. I was trying to be a good man, and these relationships are god-awful. And so I come up with a plan. The plan was, I'm never doing that again. I'm just going to be single, ride my Harley off into the sunset. Amaya's going to go to college, and I'm going to fish and hunt and go to AA. That was my plan. And when I quit having such an attachment to being with somebody or having some dependence that maybe God wasn't enough to help me to be a father to my daughter, and when I started to do Alcoholics Anonymous for me and I didn't have those attachments, what happened was I got more whole. I healed from those broken hearts. My sponsor would say stuff to me like this, victims never recover. And I say, oh man, you know. And I would be in those relationships and they were doozies and I didn't know how not to be a victim because she did it. And it was confusing. Victims don't recover, but I'm a victim. What is going on here? And so I had to learn how to not be a victim. And the big book teaches that. Putting out of minds wrongs others had done to us, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Where was I selfish, dishonest, and self-seeking and frightened? Where was I to blame? And a lot of times I needed your help to show me where I was to blame, and so I could take responsibility. And when I took responsibility, I was no longer a victim, and I became an overcomer, just like all of us are. And I got whole. And when I was done, I wasn't looking, I met Rachel. I was not looking to be in a relationship, and I remember me and Rachel's first date was breakfast, and there's another one of those handling situations that used to baffle me type of deals, because we were sitting at the breakfast table, and I don't know why I said this. I wouldn't recommend that you do this. Maybe it's a good idea. I don't know. But we're sitting across the table, and I said, hey, my intention for dating is marriage. And I was like, why'd I say that for? You know what I mean? What in the world? That is the stupidest thing to ever say. And I was like, oh, God, I'm in it now. And I was like, well, I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and a couple things I like, and like my hobbies, and they're important to me. And if that's going to be a problem, we just have a good day and good part company. And she said, that's my intention too. And if you just include me on some of the things, I think it'll be all right. And I was like, really? We dated for a year and we got married, and we've been married for 6 years now, and all the relationships I've been in prior to that caught on fire at 9 months sober. 9 months into the relationship, a year to be burning up. But me and Rachel's relationship, because of the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, our relationship gets better and better and better. It's almost unbelievable that a guy like me who went so low, and maybe you didn't go that low, and I don't want to lose you at that. The disease of alcoholism is written very clearly what it's like in our big book, and there's a lot of yets. And so for a guy like me to be able to be married to a woman like her, to raise my daughter and have the things I own today and do the things in Alcoholics Anonymous and go all over. Here I am in Denver, Colorado, and I was in an abandoned basement in West Akron, you guys. It's a miracle, I'm telling you. A miracle. I owe my whole life to Alcoholics Anonymous. Me raising my daughter owns her life to Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything I have I didn't even have a toothbrush. My wife got about 20 of them in the junk drawer. I sponsor a lot of guys, and like I said, I'm very active in Alcoholics Anonymous because I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I never want that to go away, and I'm going to tell you why. Because when I was 3 days sober, and I came back from that damn meeting, and I said, God, please, if I could just be sober and homeless, that would be cool. And I want you to know that in my 17 years of sobriety, every single dream I ever dreamed came true, so much so I got to constantly dream new dreams. And I want to keep doing this thing. And if you're new and you don't know that, I promise you, if it can happen for me, I guarantee it can happen for you. I love you guys in Denver. I pass.